You are listening to the E2C Network, where the Auburn family speaks.
War Eagle Auburn fans, welcome to No Huddle, your source for Auburn football news and discussion, part of the E2C Network. I'm AJ Richardson, and I'm also here with my buddy, my pal, my Auburn compadre. How you doing, Jared?
I'm doing well, man. Just getting ready for, I guess anytime something comes up football-wise, it makes me ready for it to start. I think we're still 4 months away maybe, but all in all, doing pretty good. How about yourself?
Doing pretty well. After seeing the news about the NFL draft, not the best, but it's okay. Like, I don't know about you. When I saw that only 3 guys got asked to even come to the NFL Combine, I got kind of the frame of reference that it's not going to be our year in the NFL draft. And that's okay. We all know we went through this coaching change. We all know the last couple of years of Gus, he wasn't necessarily recruiting at the top level like he had been. And I think that's kind of this trickle down effect of the guys going to the draft right now. And maybe even one other factor, I don't know about you, Jared, but like the COVID year gives some of these players this extra year that if they're not, really content with where they think they're going to go in the NFL, they end up staying. They stay for an extra year, develop a little bit more instead of, playing practice squad, switching around NFL teams. Sure, you're making money, but I think a lot of these guys have high hopes. I mean, you come to an SEC school and there's a lot of players that come to SEC schools and get drafted. And that's kind of the way it is. Jared, any kind of thoughts on how you're kind of framing this with us only getting one player drafted when there's lots of other schools, and particularly SEC schools, that have multiple players and lots of them getting drafted?
Yeah, several ways you can look at it, and I don't know, there's probably a little bit of everything, but Gus recruiting his last few years was not fantastic. That hurts. Player development was one of the question marks with Gus, and I'm not trying to put all this on Gus, but if you're not developing players as well, COVID messed everything up, so we didn't come in with a hot hand. I do think that another thing you were talking about, COVID letting people play another year, I think we probably had a few guys that potentially could have gone in later rounds, maybe even on the offensive line, believe it or not. Maybe Schenker could have, you never know, somebody grab him in the 5th or 6th round. You just don't know what people need. So there were players that if they had not decided to come back, which we had a lot of linemen, Schenker, we had Derek Hall, we had Colby Wooden. Those guys decided to come back. They could have gone pro.
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 guys would have been drafted.
And I was even thinking Anders Carlson. I mean, if he didn't tear his ACL,
he might have been drafted.
He might have been. And even if he's not necessarily drafted, I mean, some teams picking him up.
Yeah, and okay, so on the team right now, Tank is obviously a guy that's going to go to the NFL. So you need more. Look, Georgia didn't have a ton the past few years. They had 4 or 5 maybe, which is better than 1. And then boom, they blew up with 15.
Mm-hmm.
And really, they were able to keep their core guys together, buy in, work 1 more year. And a lot of these guys benefited from a senior year at Georgia. So maybe we'll see that here with some of our guys that decided to stay around. I don't expect a Georgia type, transformation, but at the end of the day, I think if everybody who was eligible to go to the NFL went, we probably wind up somewhere around the 4 mark versus 1, and that's not great. But
if you look at, so I've got the NFL draft picks by SEC school: Georgia at 15, LSU at 10, which we'll talk about that in a second because I think that's really interesting. 7 for Alabama, 6 for Ole Miss, 5 for Tennessee. We'd be kind of smack dab in the middle of the SEC with Kentucky and Texas A&M, which, think about Texas A&M. They are one of those up and coming SEC schools, at least at this point. And, I wouldn't be necessarily, under the first year of a head coach, wouldn't be too bad, but obviously that didn't happen and we are here. But I don't know. What's kind of your thoughts on kind of where that is? Especially the high picks like Georgia getting 15. It sounds like if you have 15 guys drafted, that's a big reload that's coming the next year, like a big reload.
Yeah, I mean, it could be. I mean, LSU, they weren't able to do it. They had that year. Georgia just beat their record of 14, I believe, from their 2019 team, LSU's 2019. So they were not able to reload. And so now they're replacing their coach. Georgia's going to have to reload. The only scary thing is they're loaded with talent. But it did take these guys, almost a full 4 years in Kirby's scheme to get to NFL level. So, yeah, for them, that's hard. Bama losing 7. Ole Miss at 6 surprises me with 6 players that were drafted. I don't know. But, I mean, good for them. I don't think that's going to be a normal for them. I would say anywhere in that 5, 6, 7 range on average every year should be kind of, 5 should probably be your low point.
Right.
For a school like Auburn. If that's not happening, that probably means you need a new coach. If you're not bringing in quality enough guys, developing them well enough to where you're putting like 5 guys in the NFL every year, I don't think that's crazy to ask.
Well, and that's one of the things that's a part of recruiting now is, hey, I'm putting these guys in the NFL, and if Harsin can't back that up, I mean, there's going to be even more people, and we had the whole craziness of right after the season ending, like everybody calling for Harsin's head. I mean, even more people are going to be calling for his head if that happens on a consistent basis.
Absolutely, and I'll move on after this. But so if you're Harsin, what are you doing? What's your pitch? My pitch would be: listen, Roger McCreary was a really good thought of player by the NFL. He was not probably ever considered first round. May have not even been second round. He stuck around. He bought into our system, bought into our mentality, and he became what a lot of people thought should have been first round and definitely got taken in the second. So, Look, give us time. Here's what we can do. This guy was a 3-star, good player. A year in our system, we made him a good bit of money.
Right.
So, look, there's not a great pitch, but that's the pitch I'm giving.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I know everybody hates this, but be a little patient. And I don't like it because, I saw the headline, only 1 player drafted for Auburn this year. And I was thinking, well, that sucks. Like, what happened? And, then you step back and you think, well, I think a lot of these players, and we've already gone through them, Derek Hall, Coley Wooden, offensive lineman, Anders Carlson. And I'm sure there's a handful more that I think would have put their name in the hat in the NFL draft, but didn't, either because of an injury or thinking they can get an extra year of development. I think in like 2 to 3 years, as long as Harsin's still here, Harsin can say, hey, we've gotten more guys drafted the longer I've been here. And we're, being competitive, developing players. That's what the, recruits want to hear. That's what, the mamas want to hear. Hey, my kid's going to be able to provide for me, later in life because they made a lot of money in the NFL. And I mean, that's the kind of stuff that sells teams. So I don't know. I think there's a lot of factors that factor into it, though I'm not like freaking out necessarily right now, but it is kind of like one of those little red, like little yellow flag of like, this might be a little bit of an issue. It's not a red flag, to me yet, but we'll just kind of, see how that happens, how the players develop and see if the NFL likes the guys that, Harsin's recruiting, because I think the guys Harsin's recruiting are not drastically different than Gus's, but, it is different. And we saw that with all the guys leaving last year. Think about how many guys jumped into the transfer portal and left over the last like year, maybe even 2 years. Well, I guess since Harsin got here, so about a year. And it's like, that's a lot of people just because like they didn't like Harsin's system. But now I think the guys that are coming in buy into Harsin's system. Let's see what it does. I think only time can tell, especially for the NFL. It's one of those things where they got to have at least a little bit of a track record and all the measurables to get into the NFL. So let's talk about the first draft pick and the only draft pick for Auburn, Roger McCreary. So even I remember thinking back when he started for Auburn early on in his career. I'm a DB. I love DBs. There was just something special about Roger McCreary. And I started like the Roger McCreary watch pretty much almost every week during the regular season. because Roger McCreary was making plays. When the quarterbacks were passing to his wide receiver, he was doing things. And I think that says a lot about, how far he's come, because he's played a lot, but I think he's gotten progressively better and better and better up until, now he's drafted in the second round, 35th overall, close to getting in the first round. And I think that's pretty impressive, because I personally don't think of Auburn right now as a big, cornerback university. But if you look back at our track history, he's our fourth cornerback in the last, 5 drafts that have been taken in the first 3 rounds. So Auburn's putting out some great cornerbacks recently, and Roger McCreary is just one of those products out there. What's kind of your thoughts on, him landing at the Titans and, how he might be able to fit in there?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I don't know much about the Titans. I know that they're not a bottom dweller team. They make the playoffs, although they just got rid of AJ Brown, or I think it's that receiver, the stud receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what they're going to be made of next year. But I mean, it's a quality team. I mean, it's better than going to Jacksonville or the teams that don't ever make the playoffs. So he's in a good spot. Hopefully he can go there and contribute, learn under the guys that are already there, and I think he'll be a good player. I don't know if he'll ever be a Pro Bowler. Maybe he will. But yeah, you're right. I mean, we have 2 defensive backs at Tampa Bay that have Super Bowl rings.
Mm-hmm.
I think we might have had a defensive back on the Rams this year. We had somebody on their team. So yeah, we've had some some success there, and I think we got our best recruiter at the defensive back spot right now on the team. So maybe that's our sales pitch to players.
Yeah, and what's kind of interesting to me, I thought, and I think like most people, our strength last year was our defense. And part of the reason was we had Roger McCreary in the secondary. We knew we could stick him out a lot of times on an island and say, guard this guy all by yourself, no safety help. And he was able to do it. And that's the kind of thing I think caught the NFL, their attention. And it got to the point where, his name was mentioned in the first round for a lot of people. And it wasn't really until, which I still think is funny, that they measured his wingspan and he was 2 inches, a little too short. And you're like, what does that really matter? Like, I understand, like, defensive back, like you have to, have a good wingspan to, like, swat the ball down, guard the defensive back or guard your wide receiver, that kind of thing. But 2 inches, like, is that, what do you make of that, Jared, when you heard that just because of that, he essentially got dropped from the first round? I mean,
I don't get some of that stuff. Now, these people get paid for it and they do it a lot more than I do. So I assume they're wiser in that. But like, here's the deal. So they spend so much time on that they wind up drafting a lot of duds. I want to know, does the kid know football? Like, how's his mind? Is he a football player? Is he a ball hawk? Is he around the ball?
Mm-hmm.
Like, put him on film. And do you want him to be taller? You do. But if you put the film on and he's a good ball player, it's the same thing with Jacoby McClain. Blows my mind with that guy.
Yeah. And Roger and Jacoby McClain have been playing top level SEC talent.
Yeah.
Which it's so obvious. I mean, again, the SEC had the most, picks of any conference. Again, like, we're going up against hard competition each and every week, literally NFL talent every single week. And Roger and Jacoby and all the other players are rising up to the challenge.
If you ever lead the SEC in tackles, you should make an NFL roster.
Yeah.
I ain't saying you're going to be a starter. I don't know if you're going to pan out. You should get a shot. If you're in the SEC, the best competition in college football, and you lead that conference in tackles, which Jacoby did 2 years ago, you should get a shot in the NFL. I mean, you at least comprehend football.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know how to fill gaps. I mean, you can make the argument, well, you lead the team because nobody else is any good. Yeah, that works a little bit on safety and DBs if they're having to come in and make tackles. I mean, a linebacker, that's their job. And if you're doing that job in the best conference in college football, yeah, I do not understand the lack of respect for him.
Hey Auburn fans, I want to take a quick timeout from this episode to bring your attention to something very special. Here at the E2C Network, we pride ourselves on bringing you the best content for Auburn fans out there. And best of all, it's free to you. But just because it's free doesn't mean there aren't costs, especially when you have a library of hundreds of podcasts, videos, blogs, and more. Many of you have reached out and asked how you can support this network in the past. Well, now I have your answer. It's called the E2C Network Booster Club over at patreon.com/E2C Network. There you'll find a membership monthly reward system where you can sign up for as little as $1 and get different perks at different tiers. Some of those perks include things such as apparel, eligibility to join us on future podcasts, recognition as an E2C Network booster, exclusive communications, and bonus content that is available nowhere else. If you love this network and want to help us keep producing podcasts like this one, please head on over to patreon.com/E2C Network to join the E2C Network Booster Club. You can also get there by going to our website, e2cnetwork.com/support. Whether you decide to join or not, we are still so appreciative that you would support us by just listening and being here, because each and every one of you is part of our E2C Network family. Well, that's it. Timeout's over. Let's get back into the episode.
I think Jacoby he doesn't have the measurables. And I think that's the issue. But you turn on any games, literally any games. I mean, especially, okay, what games was he injured in? You look at those games, how was Auburn's defense? Compare that to when Jacoby's in there. It's night and day. And it just shows how much of an impact he is. And you're just like, that's crazy. I'm glad, honestly, the Baltimore Ravens ended up signing him as a free agent. And I hope he makes the roster because he has the capability to do so. I mean, he's obviously a smart enough guy. He knows where the ball is going. He may not be the biggest guy, but that's okay. If he can, know where the ball's at, make a good tackle, and Jacoby McClain, how many times I can't even think of one. Can you think of one time where you were like, dang, Jacoby McClain missed a tackle? Like, I can't
think of a tackle. He did miss an interception that would have saved Gus Malzahn's job probably against A&M. But tackle-wise, no. And I mean, I don't get it, man. I mean, measurables, you can't measure instinct. And anybody that's tackling at that level just has instinct and knows how to fill the gap. And it should have never been this problem with Georgia State. But just go put that film on. He had to sit out a half because of a bogus targeting at Penn State.
Oh, yeah.
Georgia State ran all over us. We bring him back in, they don't score a point.
Yep.
So, I mean, and again, it's Georgia State. I get it. But, that's how impactful he is.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So, anyways, okay, I'm off my soapbox.
So, let's, we talked about impact. Somebody that impacts above the neck, Smoke Monday. You get that one?
Yes,
targeting boy. Hey, I looked him up. So he's a free agent, or signed as a free agent for the Saints. Guess how much he got paid just to sign?
I don't know, but it was, probably not a bad payday.
Like, it was way more than I was saying. I was saying like 30 to 50,000. No, 120,000 guaranteed to sign with the Saints.
Good
and I'm sure, if he signs and, ends up making the squad, I think, man, he could be making some good money. And I think Smoke is one of those guys. I mean, I even heard like 5th or 6th round potential guy, and it just didn't work out that way, that he ended up, that he just got a free agent deal versus, getting drafted in the later rounds. So I'll be really interested to see what he does, because he's a safety, but I mean, we saw it at Auburn a lot where he'd kind of walk up, almost play like a linebacker type role, especially in very, run design plays. And Smoke was a fantastic guy at that. And I think even this last year, one of the things that I saw him develop a little bit in was dropping back into pass coverage, which you're going to have to do that in the NFL a lot. So I think if he continues that ability, he's already got the run blocking ability, in my opinion, but that's something that, the passing, guarding the wide receiver, guarding the tight end that comes, that's going to be tough. That's going to be tough for him. But, if he can do it, good for him, because I love me some Smoke Monday. I loved him. Do you think, Smoke could have potentially, I know he probably wouldn't have, but do you think he regrets leaving instead of like staying another year and, using that COVID year?
No, I think he had I don't, this came to light after, but I think he had a problem with Harsin a little bit. So from that regard, I don't think he regrets it. But from just could he have developed more? I don't know that Smoke would have become any more than he is. Not saying that he's not going to make it in the NFL. It's all about fit in the NFL. But I think that I don't know that he would have, gained anything from coming back for one more year.
That's possible. And I thought the same. I don't know if he would have, done any better, at least at Auburn. And, he graduated, so he's done. He got his degree, did what he wanted to, played, 3 years at Auburn and amassed 172 tackles, 5 interceptions, and 17 tackles for loss. Like, not that bad.
Smoke was a good player. Smoke, he hits you. He hits you when he hits you, and he had a knack for the ball. He had the pick six against Bama a few years ago. He had a pick six against Tennessee that sealed the deal a few years ago when we were playing horrific offense.
Gosh, yeah.
He can find the ball. I think he sometimes takes the wrong guy. So I think occasionally, he'll at safety, I think he'll bite on it to try to get the pick. And that can, leave. You don't need to do that as a safety unless you're 100% certain, because you are the safety valve. But yeah, all in all, I think he's a quality player with the right coaching. He could have a long career in the NFL.
Yeah, he could. And I think, he said it, he's betting on himself. I think any of these guys, especially the free agents, they're betting on themselves to play well and show teams during their, their camps and essentially trying to get a spot on their team. You're essentially putting your name out there for, I want to try out for your team. And I'm taking a bet on myself to do that. And we'll see how many of these guys end up panning out. But I think Smoke has a pretty good shot at that, just because he can do a lot of things. He's a pretty versatile guy already. And, I bet the NFL likes that. Another guy, Chandler Wooten, he signed with the Arizona Cardinals. If you kind of think back on it, even his history with Auburn, he took a year off for 2020 because of COVID concerns. He also had a kid that year. And, think about this. His senior year, he comes back and has one heck of a season. He was the second leading tackler with 95 tackles this season and 5 tackles for loss, an interception, and defended 4 passes. That's incredible for a guy who literally took a full year off, came back, and, ended up winning his team over and became the team captain his senior year. So I think, again, he's one of those maybe hidden gems that, somebody like the Cardinals could, maybe use just to, give you some depth while he's kind of fitting into the NFL mold. All right. Another guy that we got, at least for the free agents, was TD Moultrie. He ended up signing with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He came back for his 5th season last year due to using a COVID year. And he now has a chance to make it in the NFL. What's your thoughts on TD Moultrie, and like where you think maybe TD could fit into the Steelers? And, what kind of attributes do you think, the NFL looked at and said, yeah, we want to take a little bit of a bet on you?
I think TD's got, freak measurables. He was, like I said, the year we recruited him, Gus said he was the best player. We just never found a role for him with Gus, and TD was a defender of Harsin, during all this saga, and said that, Harsin, he said, I don't know what everybody's talking about. I just know that, Harsin and them got, the most out of me ever. And he kind of allowed me to play my role. So I think TD would have been a guy that, had he been allowed to come back another year, he may have benefited, because I think he was, liking what he was seeing. Chandler Wooten was a big defender of Harsin as well.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean anything about how they're going to do in the NFL. But I think Chandler is a pretty mature kid. I think that for you to take a year off, and a very valid reason with COVID, but to take a year off and to come back and be voted captain that's just doesn't happen. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, and to do it and be a father. I mean, I
Yeah,
feel like that's another, big step. I mean, we've seen it with guys. As soon as they have a kid, their maturity just ramps up.
yeah, and I don't know this. He appears to be a little taller, so if he just doesn't seem real bulky. So maybe he'll find a role. Maybe there could be a kind of a pass protection type, not pass protection, but pass defender. On a third when they got to have go like a nickel type thing, but they also want a guy that can tackle.
Right.
He might be able to play because he looked at. Again, he's probably not this size, but he kind of reminded me of Carlos Dansby, more of a taller linebacker. Somebody's probably already knowing this, that's totally wrong with his size, but he just looked a little taller. So there may be a role for Chandler. TD, again, on just looking at the size of him, you're always going to love him. Can he morph that into, everything he could be? I don't know. I hope he can. I mean, there were times I think people kind of questioned whether he loved football because it just wasn't ever clicking. But I mean, that's only for TD to know. So hopefully it pans out for him.
Yeah, it really did seem like it took him a while for us to really see who TD Moultrie could be. And I still don't think like we ever really fully saw what I think even Gus saw in him and why he recruited him. And maybe that's partly on Gus for not developing him. But I mean, that's something that maybe the NFL says, hey, we got a little bit of raw talent here. And, we look at him and say, dude has some talent. Let's use him. Who knows? And I mean, for a guy to have a name like TD, like your name is TD, like touchdown, like, come on, like it's such a great football name. Like there's some great ones out there, but I love a guy like that.
I agree.
So last guy that got free agent deal is Demetrius Robertson. He was our Georgia transfer for this last year. As you know, we needed some wide receivers this last year, and he ended up, doing decently well at Auburn. Didn't do anything super crazy. Ended up this last year with almost 500 yards and 4 touchdowns in the 2021 season. And think about this: like he was a former 4-star wide receiver, and I think really up until he got injured, even before coming to Auburn, he was putting up some crazy numbers. And I think he was just kind of working his way back in. And maybe somebody looks at him, especially think about this. He was also doing some pretty good stuff on special teams. And Demetrius Robertson could be, part backup wide receiver and then, special teams guru type guy. That would be a pretty cool thing for him to be able to do. So I don't know. I feel like that could be really cool. So we will see. We will see how that goes. Any other thoughts about kind of our overall draft and kind of where guys landed?
No, not really. I mean, I think we've hit on it. I think this is basically closing of the chapter, of the class from last year, the team from last year. So, I mean, everything's looking forward now. What can we do with the guys we got? How can we get those guys, draft ready? Because that's really what it's about. Honestly, you're trying to bring players in. You're trying to make them to be the best they could be so they can go to the NFL. And in the meantime, while you're doing that, you piece that together and then you have a great team. Mm-hmm. So that's what and I'll be honest with you, regardless of everything that went on and stuff like that, I do think Harsin is a good X's and O's football coach. And so I think if Harsin can get enough talented players in there, I think he can start producing NFL talent.
Yeah.
The problem is there is no margin for error. It's a big business. I understand that. I'm not a defender of Harsin. I'm just looking at what it is, and I think he can do it. But will he be given the time? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, even look at his players that he drafted at Boise, or he got drafted at Boise. Like he had some, and that's a pretty cool thing to say, even out of a non-Power 5 school. And now he's at a Power 5 school with arguably a lot more talent, in the pool. So, again, we'll see how it turns out in the next 2 to 3 years, or however long we end up having Harsin. But if we don't start getting a bunch of guys drafted in the NFL, I think people are going to start raising some questions about, where is that? I mean, especially if you have, it's just an average season, like a 7-5 or 8-4 type season, and you're only getting like 3 guys drafted. There's going to be some big questions for you. And Harson's going to have to answer those.
Yeah, and everything's so polarizing these days. I always kind of watch what I say on here because people love or hate. I honestly couldn't care less who's leading Auburn. I just want them to make Auburn better and successful and do it in an upstanding way. I want them to be a good person. And so when I talk about Harsin, I truly am just talking about what I'm seeing. I'm not defending or against or whatnot. I think the guy can do it. I think the X's and O's piece, so Smoke Monday got a little upset and went on a rant because I think Smoke was good friends with Kobe Hudson. And so he wasn't real excited about how that went down. But even Smoke Monday said, listen, Harsin's problem is not X's and O's. He's a really smart coach. It was what we all already know by now is how he relates to people. So even his critics were saying the guy knows football. So can he put a system in place that allows Auburn to bring in enough quality players? If he can do that, I think he'll be successful.
Yeah.
You just don't have a lot of time. He's going to have to win some this year that he maybe shouldn't because you got to buy more time.
Yeah. I think at least win one game that you nobody says you should win. I mean, and that's what I mean. If we end up having another 6 and 7 season, something like that,
he's gone. I mean, I don't know if I can say that on here, but yeah,
I think you're right.
Yeah, if that happens again, I think he's honestly got to win 8 games. I know this podcast isn't about that, but yeah, I mean, but here's one thing, and then I know I'm talking a lot. We all forget. It's easy to go back and look last year and say, "Oh, we lost the last 4 or 5 games." That is terrible. Should never happen. But if you want to, that's taking out all nuances. The nuance is we were in every one of those games. We actually led in 4 of them. There was at one point we were 90-something% chance of winning like 3 or 4 of them.
Right.
And one of them
even
was
the
against
Iron Bowl.
Bama.
Yeah.
and so, like, it's easy to look at the record and listen, while it's going on, I'm pulling my hair out. But it's easy to look at the record and say, oh, they were terrible last year. They're going to be terrible this year. But if you look at the actual what happened, you're like, okay, they were a broken quarterback foot away from 8-4, 9-3. And that is not a crazy comment.
No, absolutely. I mean, you put Bo Nix in the Iron Bowl, you got to believe we win that one. You got to believe it.
Yeah. So, I mean, okay, I went off on a different direction there, but I if people are like just trying to get through the dog days of summer here, what do I have to look forward to? I would not listen to the publications out there that are saying 6 wins max, because it's possible, but if things break barely a different direction last year, it was a really good season.
Yeah. And I mean, even Harsin has said, he learned the most in this last year. And I think that's because he saw how margin, the thin, razor thin line of do you win the game or lose the game? And it is razor thin in the SEC for a lot of these games. And, sometimes it is a little bit of how the ball, falls, but it's also how your players play in the big moments. So it's kind of that combination. All right, Jared, before you get out of here, how can people stay in touch with you?
You can find me on Facebook under my name, Jared Davis.
And you can find me on Twitter, @JAY_. It's always great to be an Auburn Tiger and War Eagle.
War Eagle.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode on the E2C Network. On your way out, I want to remind you to stop by e2cnetwork.com. It's your one-stop shop for all our content across our podcast, YouTube channel, and much more. To stay up to date with us, make sure you're following social media accounts such as Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. While our content here may always be Auburn sports heavy, if it's orange and blue, it's what we do. War Eagle.